Hello and welcome to another edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Charles Fallon, back in here with another episode of this. And we got a lot of things to discuss in a very special episode of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. We're going to be doing something a little bit different today. So, obviously, after Saturday's Airs 200 at the Stone Yard, the first four races of the 2024 season are wrapped up. There's only 3/4 of the season remaining to go. So we're going to be recapping the biggest surprises and disappointments of the season so far, while also covering a couple news stories and going over maybe the most highly anticipated race of 2024 so far. And that is the night race at Disney, the Disney Plus 200, coming up next week. But first, I'd be remiss if I did not shout out the ASCA's premier partners, Rowdy Energy. Visit the first link in the ASCA's link tree down in the description box below to cop your Rowdy Energy and get your favorite flavor down there. And also, don't forget about Circle B Diecast, Plan B sales. Use coupon code ASCA at checkout for to get free shipping on any orders $20 or more. So let's get into it. What a week that it was. Obviously, the Craftsman Series was off this week, but the Ajax Cup Stars and Cars headed all the way up to the top right-hand corner of the United States in the little-known pocket of New England, known as Concord, New Hampshire, the state capital of New Hampshire. You know, New Hampshire is not really a state that you visit unless you, I don't know, want to do some sightseeing or you want to watch a race at the Stone Yard. And that was the case again here this weekend. So obviously, what a finish it was to the Airs 200. It was quite the race to begin with, just with a few notable incidents between different drivers, getting into it. And, you're prone to see that with how narrow the groove here is and how tight the racing has to be as a result. But there were quite a few more incidents than normal. Like we had Lucas Sambert and Jared Ayers going at it yet again. Ayers putting Sambert in the wall as Sambert was being a lap car. Ayers put him in the wall. He's trying to lead the race. And obviously, that ended up cutting down Sambert's tire, taking out Braden Bennett and Derek Lewis. Then, a little bit later on, the two youngest drivers in the series, Laquan Scranton and Carson Schmidt, traded paint. Schmidt popped the outside wall, and his right side was pretty much pancaked after that. He really didn't move up any further than about 11th, I would say, the rest of the afternoon. It's a miracle he even finished the race, honestly. And then a few laps after that, there was Doug Bowden getting loose. He got loose in front of the battle for third, which was being hotly contested between Jared Ayers, Bryn Renard, and Ryan Dixon. Bowden gets loose, smacks the fence, and then Ayers, it's an interesting situation looking at it. It's really a he said, she said thing. And I think it's more of just a racing incident. Ayers tried to come down, he had to because Bowden's slow car was there. And Renard, he was already there. And, he's not going to lift. There's just not enough room to, go too wide in that section exiting turn 4. And, yeah. So they collided. Ayers goes into the pit wall. The pole sitter had led not a race high, but he had led 69 laps. Nice. And collected Bryn Renard and also Ryan Dix. So that's 3 of the top 5 cars swept up in that accident right there. But then, of course, let's get to what you all came here for, I should say. And that was the last lap battle between Cameron Atwood and Chris Barrymore. And this is an interesting one, based on what happened on track, and I think what happened off track. And I think a message was sent here from the race winner. And, if you missed it, I highly recommend going back and rewatching that finish. But yeah, so basically, heading down to turn one for the final time, Cameron Atwood normally he's a finesse driver. He's not going to do anything brash. That's how he's able to save his tires so well. He doesn't normally make any dumb, idiotic decisions on the racetrack. And I'm not saying that what he did in this situation was dumb. I think that in that could he have handled it better? Certainly. He could have handled it better. But I do see the reason why he attempted what he did. And that's basically he tried to pull off a slide job into turn one on his teammate. He just full on sent it into the corner and was hoping that it would stick and then Barrymore would have to lift and boom, he'd be your winner. He's going for 3 wins in a row at this track. So he's going to throw pretty much everything he has at it. And Barrymore, he sees how deep his teammate's driving in the corner. He kind of backs up like, what is he doing? I'm going to wait to see what he does, and then I'll respond accordingly. And, he smartly backed off. Atwood drove it in there. He licked the stamp, sent it in the corner, and obviously it didn't stick. So he smacked the outside wall, and Barrymore crossed him over, drove right by, and drove off to snap his 30 race winless drought. But I think what's more interesting is kind of Barrymore's post-race comments, not just in the interview, in the winner's circle, where he was calling out Atwood for being careless. And, that's not something that a quote unquote team leader, a past champion would do, trying to take shots at his teammate. But also in his post-race tweet saying, not bad for a number 2 driver, and then tagging CJ Barrymore Racing. And we all know the feud that Barrymore had in the off season where he's like, I don't think I'm getting fair treatment at this team. I don't think I'm getting a fair shot compared to my teammate, basically kind of disputing that he thinks his teammate's getting better equipment, than he is. And, maybe they are giving each other fair equipment this season. And right now, obviously, Chris Barrymore's getting better at Cameron Atwood, but we still have a long ways to go in the season yet. So stay tuned for that. If Barrymore will be able to keep it up, we'll see. I don't know. We'll talk more about that later. But it's just an interesting dynamic that's going on at CJ Barrymore Racing, and not one that I think is sustainable. And that's the problem, is that Barrymore is under contract through 2026, but that last year is a team option. Keep that in mind. And then Atwood just signed an extension to remain with the team through 2027. You really tell me that these two guys are going to be able to work together for what? Another 2 to 3 years? I don't know, man. It's not looking good because obviously Barrymore is frustrated. He wants to be that alpha dog, that number 1 driver. But when you got a guy that scored as many wins last season as you have in your entire career, coming off a championship in the prime of his career, just signed a contract to become the highest paid driver in the sport. I know Barry was making elite level money too, $11 million a season, but this is getting very feisty, I would say, between these two. And I would keep an eye on this throughout the rest of the season. This could reach a boiling point. And for CJ Barrymore Racing, I don't know what you do at this point. You just got to call a meeting between these two guys, tell them to calm down, hash it out, do what you got to do. But the way the tension is between these guys, I don't think it's sustainable. So they definitely need to, it's nice to bring home a 1-2 finish, but now when in that 1-2 finish, your two drivers aren't exactly seeing eye to eye. So cause for concern certainly for CJ Barrymore Racing, but good for Chris Barrymore. Was actually his 20th overall ASCA victory. 20 victories in this sport at the age of 26, I think is remarkable. And I think that needs to be called out more, that he has that many wins. I know 15 of them are Mickey Mouse victories in the Craftsman series, but I mean, still 5 cup wins at the age of 26. Not many drivers, can pull that off. Caleb Hendrickson Jr. only had 6 cup wins before he retired at the age of 28. So, got to give props to Chris Barrymore snapping that 30 race winless drought, and he is squarely in championship contention this year. I would certainly not write him off at any rate, to capture the championship right now. But like I said, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a second. So as for Cameron Atwood, it's a tough break for him. Obviously, had an opportunity at history, 3 in a row at the Stone Yard, becoming only the second driver to do so, joining Diego Urquidi and that elite club. But I think he can still very much get 3 in a row one day. I mean, the guy has not finished outside the top 2 at this place since 2021, which is astonishing to me. 5 straight top 2 finishes here, 2 wins, 3 runner-up results at a track as tough as this. I mean, it just shows the caliber of driver that Atwood is, once he's in the right equipment. And hopefully, for CJ Barrymore Racing's sake, they can keep their 2 extremely talented drivers cordial and not feuding, on a weekly basis. So now let's get to the biggest surprises and disappointments of this season so far throughout the first quarter of the campaign. And this is a pretty tough list to make, I would say. For the surprises list, it's tough because a lot of these guys, you knew they had it deep down inside, but it's coming to fruition that they're able to take their talents to the next level and really kind of establish themselves as the new breed of elite level Ajax Cup drivers, as some of the familiar names started to fall off a bit and dip down. Well, for the disappointments list, I think it was pretty easy. There's a couple notable ones, and then there's another one that we're going to talk about in a bit, and discuss a disappointing organization as a whole that you probably already know of by now. So let's go over the surprises and disappointments of the 2024 campaign so far. Again, we're only 4 races in. This could change drastically after the Windows 300. But for right now, here are my surprises and disappointments of the new season. Number 1 biggest surprise of the new season, the guy we just talked about, Chris Barrymore, last week's big winner. Here he sits 3rd in points, only 2 points out of the points lead with a win on the season. One of, 4 drivers to visit victory lane. And really, I think the big surprise for me was that he was able to bring home a top 10 finish at the Streets Computerville, a track that he is notoriously awful at, but he, brought home a top 10 finish, ran well at West Virginia, and obviously got the win at the Stone Yard now. So I look at Barrymore, and I think these next 3 races are going to be crucial in determining, is he a championship pretender or is he a real deal championship contender? Because we're heading to 3 straight tracks that he has notoriously been awful at throughout his career. I'm looking at Disney, I'm looking at Belltown, I'm looking at Michigan. If he's able to bring home, I would say, at least 2 top 10 finishes in this 3-race stretch and kind of maintain his spot within the top 5 at points, I can begin to take him seriously as a championship contender. Otherwise, I'm not so sure, but as it goes for what he has done in the first 4 races of 2024, he's definitely the number 1 surprise in my book, and I don't know how he isn't the number 1 surprise at anyone's book. I think we all knew that he had the talent in him. He's an incredibly talented driver. You don't get put in the Cup Series at 19 years of age. you don't win a Craftsman Series championship, if you're not an incredibly talented driver. Was formerly the youngest Craftsman Series winner in history, and he's got 5 Cup wins at the age of 26, 20 ASCA wins at the age of 26. The guy has talent. It's just a matter of putting it all together. And, we'll see if this year is his year. I think that if he and Atwood can stay out of each other's way, it certainly could be. But, for Chris Barrymore, fantastic start to the opening quarter of 2024. But like I said, these next 3 weeks, they're going to make or break his championship bid, no doubt. Number 2 on this list, Laquan Scranton. We all knew Laquan had the talent to do this. I don't think that's even a question. We just saw what he did winning back-to-back races at the end of last season. But this year, this time last year, he was way down there in points. Wasn't even top 15 in points. I know he was like 22nd in points after the first 3 races. He was awful, and not even of his own doing, just got caught up in messes in the Ajax 200 and then got taken out by Diego Urquidy in the Airs 200 last year. This year he's gotten off to a much better start this season. Now he's currently inside the top 5 in points, while his teammate currently sits dead last. He is just every week in, week out, even after he bin the car first practice at the Stone Yard, he comes out calmly, works his way up through the field outside of his one incident with Carson Schmidt. He really wasn't involved in any trouble throughout the day. Just calmly, coolly, collectively worked his way, picked his way up through the pack, and ends up 6th at the end of the day. Pretty solid points day, all things considered. Bested the points leader, So he gained points. He continues to prove that he can, perform pretty much anywhere. Although he has DNF at both races in his career at Disney so far. So I question how he's going to do next week under the lights. But Belltown, he has ran that's another track that's given him some problems in the past. I think he blew an engine at Belltown last year in the finale, but I do think he ran top 10 here in the spring race, last year's AutoZone 200, I should say. So, that's another mixed bag for him. And then Michigan, he led the most laps here last year. So, I look at these next 3 weeks for Scranton, and I think, he's very close to winning a race this season. I don't know where it will come. Maybe Michigan, maybe again at Computer. We'll see. But, right now, you got to be super happy with Dexter Andrews Motorsports and with yourself at Dexter Andrews Motorsports with what you're seeing out of this 21-year-old so far. He looks so much more mature behind the wheel than he did this time last year. Driving with poise, finesse. That's how you got to do it these days. And he hasn't really found himself in any incidents that were directly related, caused by him. Major incidents, I should say, like race-ending incidents, race-ending feuds, that sort of thing. He stayed relatively clean. So I think that, putting him in that Craftsman car is certainly starting to pay off. And we'll see if the second-year driver the third-year driver, I should say, can keep it up. Next, biggest surprise of this season in the third and final name on this list is Shane Park. Top 5 in points right now. And, they paid him $10 million a season at Ronnie Woods Motorsports. They didn't pay him that for nothing. They didn't pay him that to run, finish 9th in the standings and run 9th every week. No, they paid him to finish 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in 3 of the first 4 races. That's why they paid him $10 million, because they knew that this kid has talent and they just needed to unlock his potential, putting him in, getting him out of Greg Healy's shadow and putting him in top level equipment. And we're seeing the results pay off. Like, I'm looking at that 24 team and I'm more scared of them than I am of our points leader, Todd Kidd, honestly. Like, this team has showed legit elite level speed 3 out of 4 weeks. Sir Kid's been more consistent. He's, finished in the top 10 in all 4 races. But Park, I think, has shown a lot to me this season. And these next 3 races bode well for him as well. He led laps at Disney last year. He was running top 5 in the finale at Belltown last year before being taken out in an accident. And then Michigan, he scored his first career win there last year. And he's won, the last 2 road races. So I look at that and I say, I'm really buying into the Shane Park hype right now as the real deal championship contender. I really am. Outside of the anomaly race at West Virginia, where he was god awful, again, like I said, his finishes first, second, and third. So, he's top 5 in points at this point in the season. And if he can continue that with a great run at Disney, I'm really looking at Shane Park and saying, man, this guy at the age of 23, he might have a realistic shot at winning this championship. No joke. So keep an eye on that 24 as the season continues to roll along. Now it's time for our biggest disappointments of the 2024 first quarter of the season. And man, there's some big names on this list, I would say. In fact, all 3 I would consider relatively big names. I know that second and third are huge names, past champions, but I would say the first name is a pretty big name as well to be struggling as much as he has, and that would be Norm Lester. My goodness, this first 4 races have been an absolute disaster. I mean, you got the DNF at Ajax. He spun on his own at the Streets Computer. He'll finish like 17th. Then last week at West Virginia, 14th, 2 laps down. And then at the Stone Yard, a race that he won 2 years ago, this time around, he runs 12th. Last car on the lead lap, wasn't even close all day long. Just never had it. Qualified horribly. And, while his teammates, Braden Bennett and Jared Ayers, showed speed early, at least Randall Woods was able to work his way up to the top 5 before his car started to fade on these longer runs. So I think it's massive panic time for this 19 team. They are 19th in points, not where they envisioned running this season. And Lester, again, he's 37 years old. He does not have time to be wasting running 19th in points. So obviously, the team's not having it. They fired his crew chief, sent him his walking papers on Sunday. Cam Rice, he's been fired. They hired Austin Russell, the lead engineer, to replace him as current interim crew chief. We'll see if that change helps him at Disney. We knew that Lester was struggling a bit last season. I think he finished like 13th or something in points. Wasn't spectacular, but I think the bottom has fallen off out of this 19 team. And something that's important to remember when it comes to Lester's current contract, they did sign him to an extension, a 2-year extension at the end of the 2022 season. But that second year is a team option. So there's no guarantee that Lester comes back next year. It's all up to Michael White Racing to bring him back for next year or not. That's not up to him. So I look at that. I look at his age, and I look at his performance this season, and Norm Lester might very quickly be fighting for his job if he cannot, pull it together, these next few weeks. Disney is, kind of a mixed bag for him over the years. Belltown, of course, he better perform at Belltown. If this team cannot score a top 5 finish at Belltown, then it might be time to detonate everything right now. Michigan, he struggles on the road courses, so we'll see. But man, obviously it is disaster time for this 19 team, and they got to find some answers. They got to find them fast because they don't have time to waste with the oldest driver in the sport right now. So tough situation to deal with for them at Michael White Racing. But second disappointment on this list is Greg Healy. 2022 champion, his best finish this year, I believe, is ninth. Ninth place is his best finish throughout the opening 4 races of the campaign. And, you can kind of see this, based on the fact that he has struggled, basically Ajax 200, that's Russian roulette, whether you're going to wreck or not, you can't really control that. But obviously, we know his struggles on the road courses. West Virginia, though, is a track that he's won at before, so you thought he could, run better there. No, no, he didn't. He was up there in the top 5, but started to fade a little bit later on and finished ninth. And then the Stone Yard is another track that he has notoriously struggled at. Not as badly as he does on road courses, but he struggles to run top 5. And it showed again because he finished ninth. I think he finished 8th, correction. He finished 8th in the Airs 200. So I wouldn't say hit the panic button on this team at all, considering the next 2 tracks that are coming up, Disney and Belltown, short tracks. That is Healy's bread and butter. Don't be shocked to see him win one of the next 2 races, especially Disney coming up at his home track. He won here in 2020, won here in 2022. The pattern continues itself. He'll win again here in 2024, but we'll see. So, I wouldn't be too concerned about him. And then Belltown, we know how dominant he's been there. Just absolutely, completely destroyed the field at Belltown in the finale last season. Wasn't even a competition. So, we'll see how he does these next 2 weeks. I think he'll finally start to get his season back on track. But the question is it too little, too late? He's already 30 something points back. And if he does, happen to find himself involved in any trouble, like Cameron Atwood was at Disney last season while leading, swept up in an accident not of his own doing. If Healy DNFs, at Disney or something like that, or at Belltown, that's what I'm saying. Oh boy, now he's really done for. Because he needs these next 2 weeks to save his season. He needs them desperately. So, man, we'll see on Healy, but I do certainly expect to see him bounce back. He is a disappointment, though, considering his best finish is 8th through the first 4 races of the season, and he's sitting, 12th, 13th in the standings. That's not good enough for a past champion of the sport. Just Newton Enterprises, they've clearly got some work to do for their driver. And then it's weird saying that a guy that's inside the top 10 in points is having a disappointing season. I get that. I certainly do understand the sentiment there. But Randall Woods, let's put him on this list after what I would call a disappointing outing at the Airs 200 last week. This is a guy that had cycled his way up to 5th on a couple of these restarts. He had gotten himself, up inside the top 5. And both times his car just faded horrendously on the long run. And he dropped back and back and back and back. And he finished the day in 10th. And, his best finish this season, I think, is like 7th. His best finish on the season right now is 7th on the campaign. And, like I said, he's 8th in points, but man, this team just has no speed right now. I don't know what to say to it. They're okay, but okay is not good enough for a 2-time champion, 26-time Ajax Cup winner. Ajax 200, Northern 200 winning driver. Okay, it's certainly not going to cut it. So this is another team at Michael Racing that needs to do some soul searching. I don't think they fire their crew chief because, Woods has won 2 championships with his current guy top the box. That wouldn't make too much sense. He's done a lot with his crew chief right now. So don't fire the crew chief. That really doesn't make much sense. Steve Wallace has done a fantastic job, but just they've been uninspiring this season. and he is the defending winner at Disney. So, maybe he can bounce back there. But man, like, again, I don't know if it's father time for him and Lester, or if the 18 and the 19 are just missing it every single week. But, I think it's time to maybe get a little panicked if you're a Michael White Racing fan. And certainly if you're the organization, you need answers, because what they're doing right now is not good enough. Even when they do have speed, their young drivers are totaling race cars, and their old drivers that are keeping the cars in one piece are running 10th to 12th every week. That's not going to cut it. It's not going to cut it. You're supposed to be competing out there for championships, and they're not even close right now. So, man, it's tough. It's a really tough deal for these guys, and we'll see if they're able to turn it around. But right now, it's not looking too good for that 18 group. All right, we are back to discuss the final two topics of the podcast this week. And that is, of course, number one is discussing some silly season news that just dropped right before we started this. And that is that the ASCA's lone Canadian outfit, True North Motorsport, has filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Now, if you don't know what Chapter 7 means, that means they are liquidating all assets. That means that this organization is done. They're done. They're not going to be returning after the 2024 season. They intend to hit the big red button and exit the ASCA following this season. And you hate to see it. Like I said, the ASCA is the lone Canadian outfit. They haven't had the success I'm sure they had hoped with their Canadian driver, Jack Ajax, but I feel like they've grown every season, and they've come close to victory a few different times with Ajax at, plate tracks and road courses. You hope that they can at least get one before the season's out, but you just never know in this business and how competitive the Craftsman Series is these days. But it's a tough break, for that team, and you hate to see any team in this sport shut down. But we just talked about, how, the first four races have produced different winners that are all making over $10 million a season. This sport is expensive. So, if you're not getting the results that you hope to get, you can't just put around back there in 15th every week, for fun. Like, no, you're blowing millions of dollars out the track every single week. So it's tough. It's tough to see them go. They've had a very nice 4-season run, I would say. And I'm interested to see who buys their assets. We've heard that, Randall Woods Motorsports has considered expanding. We've heard that Taylor Motorsports is considering opening a Craftsman Series program. Maybe Snoots Enterprises is interested in expanding again. To get a leads card back, to get some Healy, some more track time. I don't know, what's going to happen with their assets and all that situation, but it's a tough deal overall. So hate to see that for True North Motorsport, but and hate to see that for Jack Ajax, especially. Where's he's going to end up next year? No idea. He's now a free agent basically, after this news. So tough situation for everyone involved, but we'll see what happens with them, and who ends up scooping up their assets in the coming weeks. But then we get to the final topic, and that is, I would argue, but outside of the Windows 300, this race I have had circled on my calendar since it was announced. March 27th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, the Disney Plus 200, under the lights at Disney Motor Speedway. And oh, did I mention this is the 10th edition of this race as well? Yeah, there's that too. So so many different storylines to follow. Um, this is a track that we know is known for producing fantastic racing, fantastic finishes, photo finishes, might I add. And you put this racing under the lights, man, I'm super hyped for this race. It's also in a completely different spot on the calendar. Normally it's much later in the season. Normally it's, a couple months down the road, but now this is the first short track race of the year. So really going to get to see who to watch on these short track races. Greg Healy, Cameron Atwood. I mean, who else are you going to watch other than your past two champions, Greg Healy, Cameron Atwood? Let's be honest with you. But it's still going to be very interesting because we know in these short track races, anything can happen. I mean, we talked about earlier, just look at what happened to Atwood at Disney last season. He had the dominant car, was leading the first, 43 laps or so, had the lead, was cruising, blowing by the field, putting everyone a lap down. And then he just gets taken out, by some cars on the tail end of the lead lap, an accident that wasn't of his own doing. And he had to dig out of that hole in the championship the remainder of the season. So it's such an unpredictable track and an unpredictable race as any short track is in this business. And, as a result, I think the obvious picks, the guys to watch are Healy and Atwood. Certainly. Neither of them have won this season. And, they're obviously pretty dominant here. So, but I think there's also some other names to, kind of mark down in your list and say, don't be surprised if they win here either. And I'd say look at both of the Urquidy brothers. Diego has dominated this race a couple different times and fallen short for whatever reason. I look at 2020 and 2022, got pit road penalties both times and just couldn't really battle back to them in time to, capitalize on his domination. And he's won this race 2018, 2021 as well, so yeah, I look at that. I look at the fact that past champions have won this race every year since 2018. I think that's also telling as to who to watch for this race. And, it's going to be interesting. I certainly think it's going to be interesting. Just under the lights, the ambiance, the atmosphere. Like I said, the Urquidy brothers are ones to watch. Nick Urquidy, again, normally consistently runs top 5 here as well. Shane Park led laps here last year. I'd keep an eye on him throughout the course of this race. But I think the guy that needs this win the most, that has the most to gain from winning at Disney, not just because it's his home track, but he needs this win to put himself back in championship contention. That's Greg Healy. We just talked about him in the disappointments category. He needs a great result. I'm not talking top 5. I'm talking a dominant victory to say, hey, don't forget about us over at Suits Enterprises. We're here to stay. So I'm looking at him, and that's my guy. That's who I'm going with this week. I know it's like, oh, it's obvious. Come on now. You're really going to pick Healy? Yes, I'm going to pick Healy. I mean, haven't he and Atwood won like the last 15,000 tour track races in a row? Exactly. That's what I thought. I say that as Randall Woods just won this race last season. But let's be real. The only reason that happened is because Atwood got swept up in the accident early on. And then Healy, finished right behind Woods in second and was catching him late. So I'm looking at Greg Healy. That's who I'm circling as that's the guy who I think the field needs to have their eyes peeled for. I also think Cameron Atwood, of course, will be a factor. in this race as well. So it's going to be a fun one under the lights. We talked about it a few different times before, but it's really going to be fun. I think the ASCA nailed it out of the park, scheduling this as a night race. I loved watching the Advocare 200 for many years as a night event, but I think that it had kind of gotten stale. We've seen that race as a night race for almost a decade now. So I think that their decision to kind of switch things up and give this night race to Disney, put Advocare later in the season as a day race, I think they made the right call here. So I'm really excited to see that. And hopefully you guys are too. Short track racing under the lights, especially in the Cup Series, is going to be it's going to be something. We'll leave it at that. So hopefully we get a clean, safe race on Saturday night. Hopefully you'll be tuning in, and we'll see if my prediction of Greg Healy winning comes true. That's it for this week's edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. Shout out to the ASCA's premier partners in Rowdy Energy and Circle B Diecast. Be sure to go down to the ASCA's link tree to take advantage of those promotions and shop with those great companies. And we'll be back next week to recap all the action under the lights in Disney. So this is Charles Fallon signing out with this edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast.